Welcome back to another MVM Reviews. Today we have Horrified from Prospero Hall and Ravensburger. It is a 1 to 5 player cooperative game that's based all around the Universal monsters.
Yeah, so you've got the Creature from the Black Lagoon, you've got the Bride of Frankenstein and Dracula, the Mummy, all of these, and you can use any combination of these things to try to compete against in the game.
All right, so the main game is going to be taking place in a particular village, which is going to be represented by a number of different locations. You're going to have your own standee, which is going to be represented not only by the standee itself, but also a placard, which is going to be a particular character. Each character is going to have their own number of actions at the top of their tile, any special abilities they have, and then a starting location at the very bottom.
Yeah, you're also going to have this bag of items. The items are going to be very important. The game board is going to start with 12 of these randomly pulled from the bag and placed in specific locations that's denoted on each of the items as you pull it from the bag.
These tiles are 3 different colors. They're blue, yellow, and red, which represent the 3 types of items that you will need in order to defeat the number of creatures that are in the game. Now, the game can be played with 1 creature all the way up to as many as you wish, which scales the difficulty in the game.
Yeah, we've played this with 2 creatures. They actually have a recommended, suggested starting session with Dracula and the Creature from the Black Lagoon. You can go all the way up to 4, but 4 is very, very difficult. 2 is a nice starter that you can get through.
So the game can actually end in one of 2 ways. 1, if the terror track reaches the highest threshold, which in this case is 7. This threshold is going to be increased for a variety of different things, but mostly for the monsters terrorizing the villagers who are in the village that you're trying to protect. How you can win, though, is by defeating all of the monsters that are in that particular game.
And defeating them takes a wide array of different strategies and tactics because each of these monsters is going to have a very specific route that you have to take to defeat it. For instance, Dracula, you have to go around to 4 different locations, destroy his coffins, and then collect enough red items in order to defeat him when you meet him in an area.
Each setup is going to be a little bit different depending upon the monsters that you're using. We have Dracula, Frankenstein and his bride, and then the Creature from the Black Lagoon. Each of them is going to introduce different tiles into the game and different objectives on how to defeat them. Now, the game itself is extremely easy to play. There's a hero phase, and then there's a monster phase on a single player's turn, and then it's going to go to the next player. And these are all very simple to do. But starting with the hero's turn, you are going to take a number of different actions depending upon the number of actions that is on your particular tile. And this is going to range from 3 up to 5 depending upon the character that you're using. Actions can consist of a wide variety of different things, but the typical thing you're going to be doing is moving across the board from one location into an adjacent location. You're also trying to pick up a number of different items to use them against the monsters.
Yeah, that's one of the other actions you can take. You can pick up the items in your location. Now, one of the other things you can do is use your special ability. Your abilities are going to just spend another one of those actions, and this is where the flavor of all the characters comes into play. For instance, there's a character down here that we have, the archaeologist, who's able to pick up those items, like we just discussed, from an adjacent space. It's also important to remember that when you're moving on this board, you're going to be moving along these lit paths. There are some paths along the waterways, but those are specific to the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
When you move from one location to the next, you're able to also carry villagers with you. Each of the villagers are going to be introduced by very specific monster cards that are flipped during the monster phase. Each of these different villagers is going to have a location where they're going to start according to the card, and also a location that they're trying to get to. As you move, you're allowed to help these villagers go to their safe location. So one of the things you're going to be doing is taking those villagers from one location to the next and dropping them off in order to gain perks, which we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, every player is going to start with a perk card, and then there's ways of getting those. Like Jeremy just described, when you get one of the villagers to a safe place, you're able to draw another perk card. That is a challenging thing to do, so these perk cards are not going to be very plentiful throughout the game. But for instance, this one allows me to, when I use it, and it's important to note that these are usable on a hero's turn only, but you can use it on any hero's turn during the game. This one allows us to all draw an item from the bag and place it out on the board. Also, keep in mind that those items can be shared, which is another one of the actions. When 2 people are in one space, the active player can say, I'm going to share. This opens it up for anyone in that space to share items as much as they want back and forth with each other.
And now we've come to the crux of the game, using these items. You want to use these items to advance your cause against the monsters. Each of the monsters requires an X number of tiles, or items in this case, in order to defeat them. We'll just talk about Dracula because he's probably the most simple in the game. Dracula is going to start with 4 different coffins that are placed in various locations on the game board. They require a combination of 6 red tiles. I don't mean the total number of tiles, I mean the added value of all these tiles. And to be in that location, you can use one of your actions to basically crush that coffin. When you do so, you're going to take that coffin from that location and lay it onto the like side of that area, showing the crushed side. You have to do that 4 times with him, meaning you have to find a lot of red items in the game and then use them on the coffins. Once you do so, you actually have to go back to Dracula's space and use yellow items in a combination of 6 or higher in order to defeat him. Each of these different monsters have different combinations of items and different things that you're going to be doing against those particular monsters.
Yeah, just to give you an idea of how that's going to play as a dynamic with the other monsters, Frankenstein and his bride are going to require yellow and blue items in order to sort of dial their humanity up. So if you're collecting yellow to go defeat Dracula, you might also want to use those to dial up that humanity. Another example is the creature from the Black Lagoon. You're going to want to collect yellow, red, and blue in order to move this boat all the way through this river to his lair. Once it's at the lair, then you're also going to use those same color tokens to try to defeat him in his space.
All right, so we've given you a basic overview of the game. Let's get into our review because we'll talk about more of the components and more of the aspects of the game as we talk about whether or not we liked it. So let's first get into the negatives. I actually don't have a whole lot of negatives to say about the game, and the only one that I may say is that it may be a little bit too light for your gamers, like your typical hardcore gamers that love heavy cooperatives like Robinson Crusoe and games like that.
Sure.
There's not a lot to the game and not a lot of meat to the game. There's definitely enough substance in here to keep people entertained, especially as you gear up the difficulty, but it is a lighter, family-friendly game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would put it to the list of cons. If you are a hardcore gamer and really want a heavier game, this is going to be on the lighter side. Now, the flip side of that is it's a great lighter side entry level to cooperative games. This, for me anyway, is going to replace any reason to play things like Pandemic or Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, those kind of games. This game, anyone can relate to this, and that's one of the pros for me. I really didn't have any cons to speak of, so I'm going to go right into the pros. This game has a theme that players, no matter what their age, are going to be able to understand. Everyone's heard of these monsters. No one on the planet Earth hasn't heard of Frankenstein or Dracula. So people can kind of get into that theme, and the gameplay plays smoothly enough where it's light, but there's enough layers, in my opinion, for even some enthusiast gamers, like me, for instance. I really enjoyed this. I'm not a huge co-op fan, but this really, really was a fun experience.
Not to mention that, but it's also got a really quick pace to it. Like, your turns are 30 seconds or less. You're using those actions quickly, going into that monster phase, activating those monsters in turn order, and then it goes right to that next player. So the game plays extremely fast. Thing I love about it is that it scales very well, and it's not just with the player count, which also is great because I've played this at 1 player all the way to 4 player, and each of those player counts is fantastic. But also it scales really well with difficulty. If you want a light game that you can play with your family, you play 2 monsters, and it's a fairly easy game to play. If you want a challenging game, play with 4 monsters, and I've done that twice now, and I have failed miserably. So you can scale the game very well with not only the player count, but also the difficulty that you wish to play with. The game also is very, very easy to play. It's not overcomplicated at all. There's a lot of cooperative games that have a lot of aspects that make the game just more challenging because of the rule set. The rule set here, as we already mentioned, makes it quick and fast. So the rules are very easy to learn, but they're also very easy to teach.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big pros for me too. It's easy. Any player's turn, you're going to take that hero turn, use your actions, and then go on to the monster phase. The one thing I wanted to say about the monster phase is it keeps the tension throughout the game. After every player, you're going to draw one of these monster cards and resolve it. And this is one of the things we didn't talk about, but this is what's going to, at the top, introduce new items out on the board so you can use more items. And then there's an event in the middle that's either specific to a monster, so having that monster do something, or it's going to introduce some of these villagers out onto the board so that you can help them out a little bit. Then at the very bottom is the really tense moment. You're going to look down there and you're going to see what monsters are going to activate then, because the monsters are going to activate after every single player's turn. You're going to go through that and activate all of those monsters that may or may not be on the board, and then go on to the next player's turn.
And that's probably the last positive I have about the game, and I think it's probably everyone's positive who talks about this game, is the components and the monsters themselves. There's 6 unique monsters in here. How you mix and match these is going to change your game drastically, making it more challenging or a little bit easier depending upon the combination of items that you need. But the monsters themselves are incredibly unique in the way that they play and the way that you have to defeat them.
Yeah, in fact, the monsters also bring in more components. Like Jeremy said right at the beginning of the review, some of the monsters have these tiles that will actually go onto the board and replace the locations with a little bit of information to tell you what you need to do. But those monsters, I can't reiterate this enough, are the flavor of this game. It is an absolute blast to try out a new monster and see how they work. This is the mummy, which we don't have out on the board here, but this actually introduces a little bit of a slide puzzle mechanism where you're sliding these scarabs around on this, and once you have them in the correct location, then and only then can you hunt down the mummy and kill him.
Yeah, I don't have many light co-op games. In fact, I can't think of any offhand. I gear more towards the more heavier cooperative games like Marvel the card game, which I'm really into right now. This fits a niche for me that I don't play a lot, and it's absolutely staying in my collection because I enjoy it.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. As soon as I play this, I'm looking forward to playing it again, especially when you lose.
Yeah.
I played it over the weekend. We played against 3 monsters, and we came this close to winning, and I really wanted to just reset and try again.
So that is Horrified. It's from Ravensburger and Prospero Hall. 1 to 5 player game, all about the Universal Monsters. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.